ready to see Brad, guys. Who's ready? See Brad, guys. Who's ready? All the way from Memphis, Tennessee, Brad Birkedahl. Let's go, baby. Let's go.
How's everybody out there? You do better than that, right? I'm gonna take a short break. I'll be right back. Music joke. So again, I'd like to thank Paul. Give it up for Paul. He got me out here. Well, it's a great program for people of all ages, world of rock, music lessons, and more. And I was honored to teach some folks. This kid right here, he was my last lesson today. He's great. And there's some here? Okay, good. All right. Fantastic. So, and one of the lessons I teach with guitar, one of the first things I tell them is, you learn 3 chords, you can play thousands of songs. End of story. That really is the truth. But enough of the jokes. Let's get down to it. I'm going to play a little bit, and then I'm going to give you some stories behind some of these great songs from Memphis, Tennessee, which is where I live now. And whether you know it or not, whether you walk into a drugstore or whatever, most often there's always music being piped in from somewhere, and usually 99% of it came from a Memphis studio. And that's the truth. So we'll talk about that a little bit too. And later we're going to open up the floor for questions, right, Paul?
Yes, sir. Oh, yeah. I have a microphone, or you can just call out if you have a question.
Yeah, we'll do it Phil Donahue stuff.
That's right.
Okay. So, let's do this first. All right. It's in tune. Okay. I'm going to do a little instrumental here from Les Paul. You remember Les Paul, anybody? Okay, pretty famous guitar player. I don't really know the song, but I'll try anything once. Called Waiting for the Sun to Rise. All right. Thank you. That's fun. Now that I'm warmed up, I can start the show. Here we go. So I started with the Les Paul song because I want to talk a little bit, a lot about Elvis Presley. You ever heard of him? I bet these kids, have you heard of Elvis? And that's amazing. I went to Paul's school the other day where he teaches the grade school kids. And I got to speak with them a little bit, 8, 9 years old. And I mentioned Elvis, and they all raised their hand, and they knew some songs. It just goes to show you some of this great music from Memphis is still happening and having an impact. So I'm lucky enough to make my living performing it. So Les Paul and Chet Atkins. Les Paul was kind of a jazzer. Chet Atkins could play the jazz style, but he was more of a country guy with you call it the Merle Travis was a guitar picker, and there was a style called Travis picking, which is where you use your fingers and thumb pick or whatever, So Scotty Moore loved Merle Travis. He loved Chet Atkins, and of course Les Paul. He couldn't play just like them, but he figured out how to kind of make it sound like that, So that's who he was listening to. Scotty Moore, who played guitar for Elvis Presley in the 50s, he was listening to these country and jazz guys. Then this greasy kid from Memphis, North Memphis, walks into Sun Studio. 1953, here's what happens. The legend goes he walks in to record a record for his mom. Now, that may be truthful. I don't know. I wasn't there. Okay. But I really think he wanted to know what he sounded like. Because guess what? The Presleys were so poor, they couldn't even afford a record player. Right? So what was she going to play it on? Think about that. So he probably had a friend or went to the record store where he could play it or whatever and listen to a song. So what's interesting about this is 1953. It's in the summer. And Elvis is right out of high school. He's 19 years old, driving a truck for Crown Electric. Not a big rig like a 48 Ford pickup, just delivering parts to contractors on site. So he's on a lunch break, walks into Memphis Recording Service, is what they called it back then. And their motto was, we record anything, anywhere, anytime. Sam C. Phillips was a founder and owner of Sun Records. He wasn't there that day. Sitting in the front office was the secretary, Marion Keisker. And Elvis wanted to pay us $4. And back in 1953, $4 was a lot more money. And Elvis didn't have a lot. If he's making $35 a week, $4 was a lot, you know? So he saved up that $4. And he puts it down, and he sits down in this little small studio, and he's got a microphone and a guitar that's really out of tune. And he records a couple songs. And one of the songs is That's When Your Heartaches Begin, and I'm going to do it. It was by the Ink Spots. They were a really popular African-American group back in the day. And this song was from the 40s, so he does this about 10 years later. And it goes like this. This song is what sparked the interest of Sam Phillips a year later, saying, call that kid up with the sideburns, you know. But this is the song. It was very slow. I'll do a little bit of it. If you find a sweetheart in the arms of your friend, that's when your heartaches begin. Time must come to an end. That's when your heartaches begin. Love is a thing you never if you bring a friend into your love affair, that's the end. Sweetheart, that's the end of everything. That's when your heartaches begin. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. I know it's a really sad song, but it's what it was. It's things that he was listening to. So this is what he records. He records a song like this. It sits there for, about a year. I mean, he takes the record somewhere, whether it was for his mom or whatever, we don't know. But he had it, right? So a year later, Sam Phillips, who owns Memphis Recording Service, he's just kind of, pacing back and forth. He was looking for something new. They had great pop music out back then. You had Perry Como, you had Dean Martin, you had great blues music, but Sam was just getting fidgety and was waiting for something different. Well, the whole reason Sam Phillips started Sun in the first place was because he was a great lover of the blues music of Memphis, Tennessee. And he would see all these great blues performers, some of them like B.B. King, Howlin' Wolf, they all came from the area. They would play at a place called Church Park in downtown Memphis, and they would play for tips. And nobody was recording these guys there. Why? Because this was a time of segregation and white and black, and in the South, times were tough and they were different, So a lot of white producers weren't even going there to record black artists. Sam said, forget about it, I'm gonna make some money. And he does it. So January 1, 1950, he opens up Memphis Recording Service for the blues. But he recorded great blues artists like B.B. King, Ike Turner, as a matter of fact, Jackie Preston, whoever, Junior Parker. But what they're probably more famous for is that birth, the rock and roll, the Big Bang of rock and roll is what they call it, So 1953, Elvis walks in, records a song. A year later, Sam is feeling fidgety, looking for something different. And Marion, the woman who pressed record that day that Elvis walks in, she's going through her Rolodex. Remember, they weren't going through their, iPads or whatever. And they're looking up. She left a note, greasy kid with sideburns. That's what she read. And she remembered him because he just looked A little different. It was the conservative South. A lot of guys Elvis's age didn't have 5 inches of greasy hair. They just didn't. A lot of the truck drivers did back then, but he wasn't, the big rig drivers, but he didn't do that. And he had sideburns. A lot of guys weren't having real long sideburns. So she remembered that. Calls him a greasy kid because of the hair, and he was all dirty from delivering the parts, So she calls him up, and what he ends up doing, he goes to Scotty Moore's house. Remember the guitar player who played for Elvis. Now, Scotty was actually playing guitar in bands like the Starlight Wranglers and things like that at Sun. He was kind of a session guitar guy there at Sun. But he had a real job cleaning hats like this and minks, back then when people bought mink coats. So, he had a real job. But he would play kind of moonlight in the studio. So Elvis is sent to Scotty Moore's house to more or less audition. Okay, remember 1954, conservative South. Elvis Presley knocks on the door in North Memphis to Scotty Moore's address. What's he wearing? Pink pants, the white stripe down the side, and he's got a white belt. Scotty Moore's wife answers the door, and she says, "Scotty, someone's here to see you," And she was kind of freaking out. And then Scotty saw this and thought, what? Who's wearing pink pants? Who does that, Well, Elvis did. He just did. The black performers on Beale Street, what they would do, they would shop at a place called Lansky Brothers Clothing. Here comes the plug, Paul. Yeah, it's coming. So, and that's where the black performers would get their clothes, allowed clothing. So a lot of the whites were not dressing like this. So Elvis stuck out. He was just really this thing from the beginning, This jacket's brought to you by Lansky Brothers, ladies and gentlemen. You can go to LanskyBrothers.com and get what you want. So they're still making clothes today. Isn't that great? Give it up for Lansky's. All right. They got clothes for girls, too. All ages, all sizes, everyone. Kids, everything. So Elvis tries out, and he's singing things like Harbor Lights and some slower songs, And Scotty goes, well, I guess he sings okay, but I'm not really impressed. Bill Black lives 2 doors down. Bill Black is an upright bass player. He slaps that doghouse bass, right, like a hillbilly country guy. He comes over, and he doesn't really say anything. He's just kind of watching, and he sees the pink pants. He's like, are you kidding me? What's going on? It was really like a thing. So Elvis leaves, and Scotty and Bill kind of discuss it. He goes, yeah, he's okay, but I mean, I've heard it before. They weren't impressed. So Sam asks them, what did you think? And they said, well, it wasn't that big of a deal. And Sam goes, well, bring him to the studio. So they go to the Memphis recording service, and they're there all night. This is, around July 5th, 1954. And they're doing the slower music and things like that, ballads. And Sam's like, look, I mean, we're kind of wasting our time. We're trying to get something out of you. They're so tired. Repetition, when you're playing and performing and practicing, you can go a little nuts, right, Paul? A little crazy, when you do the same thing over and over. So that's how they feel. And remember, they cut the air off in the hot South because it was making a loud noise in the studio and they're recording, so they're sweaty, Bill Black gets on that bass, and he starts just slapping it, hooting and hollering, and they're making fun of a song called That's All Right, Mama. It was an old blues song, all right? And then Elvis comes in and he starts singing it real fast, and Scotty starts playing the guitar. Sam runs into that studio, and he said, hold it, what is going on? And they all stopped. They thought they were getting busted. And they're like, we're sorry, we're just messing around. And he goes, do it again, we're rolling tape. So he goes back in there, he hits record. They end up making a great take of That's All Right, Mama. And that became the first song that Sun Records had out on Elvis Presley that was played on the radio downtown Memphis, WHPQ, on the Red Hot and Blues show, hosted by Phillips. That's the first time people heard Elvis Presley. They played a recorded acetate, which is a aluminum disc. It wasn't to vinyl yet, so they only had about 19 plays on it. So they did that, and then they printed them, and the rest is history. That blues song Elvis took and kind of countryfied. He sped it up a little bit, gave it a 2-beat bounce with the bass, and then we ended up calling it Rockabilly. When you fuse, country and rhythm and blues and gospel, they started calling it Rockabilly. But they didn't call it that right away there. They were calling it Hillbilly Bop, Western Bop, all this sort of thing. They didn't know what to say. So I'm going to do it for you. Do you guys mind? Let's do That's All Right, Mama. Well, that's all right, Mama. That's all right with you. That's all right, Mama. Just any way you do, that's all right. That's all right. That's all right now, Mama, any way you do. I'm leaving town, baby, leaving town sure. Then you won't be bothered hanging around your door. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right now, Mama, any way you do. if I could hang around your door, that's alright. That's alright. That's alright now, mama, any way you do. That's alright, mama, alright. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Thank you. So thank you so much. These I just love these stories because that whole rock and roll thing. Now, granted, there's some controversy about who was the first rock and roller and this and that. I'm going to kind of try to clear that up. And it's really, the music had been around for years and years and years. You had, Bill Haley with Rock Around the Clock in 1955, and you had Little Richard putting out tunes, Chuck Berry. But the problem, what happened was, again, with the segregation, when a white guy was doing the black music and making it his own, it was just a little different. So then you kind of, sadly, it became acceptable. That's just what it was. Elvis loved these records, and they would actually call them race records back then. It's just what they did, but it was just R&B, rhythm and blues. So, no one stole from anybody. They all just kind of learned from one another. You can call Elvis the king of rock and roll. You can call Bill Haley the king of rock and roll, whatever, but they were all in it together, just making music, 3 chords and the truth, baby. So, now I want to shift gears to a guy named Carl Perkins. Have you guys heard of Carl Perkins? All right. The king of rockabilly, they call him, yeah. From Jackson, Tennessee. Jackson, Tennessee is about an hour east of Memphis. It's just right down I-40. So, Carl Perkins was very poor. All these guys that I'm talking about, they weren't born and bred in Memphis. They came from somewhere else and ended up in Memphis, a river town, the Mississippi River. So, here's Carl Perkins, man, and everyone's getting wind about this Elvis kid, and there's guys that are playing this music, but no one knows who they are. They're just doing it on their back porches. And Carl's thinking, I can cut a record. I know how to play that hillbilly music. Carl goes to Memphis, and Carl's a songwriter. He's got a lot of songs he has written. And he adapted a song called Matchbox. It was an old blues song from the cotton fields, and he kind of gave it a rockabilly vibe. And on the session, it was Carl Perkins on electric guitar and vocals, his brother, Clayton Perkins, on guitar, acoustic guitar. There was a bass player and drummer, W.S. Holland. And there was a piano player, a session piano player, okay? The session piano player, he was there just to play backup. He was from Lafayette, Louisiana, and he couldn't shut his mouth. Jerry Lee Lewis, have you heard of him? Here we go, that's what we're talking about. So Jerry Lee Lewis got his start playing session, just background piano with Carl Perkins, okay? Here's the problem. So Carl's doing this Matchbox song, and when it comes for the solo, Carl's doing the guitar solo. And here's Jerry Lee banging on the piano. Cut, let's do it again. They're trying to explain to Jerry, this isn't your solo, this is Carl's song. You just got to kind of chill out, And Jerry was, 2021, he was the killer, they called him. But they started calling him the killer when he was a kid. So, he was crazy, He's still around, too. He's a good old guy. 82 years young. How about that, huh? And so anyways, matter of fact, Jerry Lee played B.B. King's in New York City about a month ago. So there you go. So anyways, here he is. And Jerry Lee's thinking, man, I can record too. Why can't I do it? So this is, everybody this Elvis thing started, and everyone else was saying, well, I can do it, and they could. So the whole reason Jerry Lee got there in the first place was because he read about Elvis, and he wanted to do it. He wanted to do it better and his way and whatever. So for Jerry Lee to get to Memphis, he and his dad, they sold like several cartons of eggs to fund the trip to Memphis for gas and hotel or whatever. And then they'd go drink whiskey in the local bar. That's just, they were heck raisers. We got kids who are gonna watch it. So anyways, Jerry Lee, so he gets to town and he ends up, getting like $5 a session, which was pretty good money back then to be this background piano player. And then finally Sam's, Jerry's kind of bugging him to just record some of my stuff, and Jerry ends up doing it, So Jerry wrote a song called The End of the Road, all right? So I'm gonna do The End of the Road. It was one of the first songs Jerry recorded that he had written. Then I'm gonna do the Matchbox song. Sound good? All right, so this song kind of has almost like a Dixieland feel. Now, when you're doing Jerry Lee, you gotta do your best without a piano. It's just, Ways dark, not as long. Okay, if I ever get home, I'm waiting at the end of the road. Sitting my shine, needing the moon out. Well, the heck, we ain't got no blues, I'm waiting at the end of the road. sass. Get a best blessed on the floor. When we get to there, we're gonna rock some more. Well, way is dark, night is long. I don't care if I ever get on my way at the end of the road. No sass, ain't fresh to get it on the floor. When we're gonna there, we're gonna rock some more. Well, the way is dark, night is long. I don't care if I ever get on my way at the end of the road. Girl, I'm gonna wait now at the end of the road. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. So that's Jerry Lee Lewis. That's, you know, he was, the guy is really something. Now, let me do the Carl Perkins song real quick. Matchbox. Let me give you a quick story behind the song Matchbox. I said it was an old blues song, all right? Now, what happens here is there's a lyric, the first lyric, I'm sitting here wondering, will a matchbox hold my clothes? And when you think about that, you're thinking, okay, I get it. The guy's so poor, he's got nothing, so he can't even get it in a matchbox. That's not what it's about. It's when some of the folks in the cotton fields picking, if their overalls were broken, the button, they take a matchstick and put it through there and hold up your clothes. So I'm sitting here wondering, will a matchbox hold my clothes? You learned one thing today. Take that home. All right. So here it goes. The Carl Perkins version. We're in the key of A for those of y'all taking notes. And there will be a quiz later. I'm sitting here wondering, matchbox on my clothes. Girl, I'm sitting wondering, mama, matchbox on my clothes. Matches have got a long way to go. There'll be your little dog till the big dog comes. There'll be your little dog till the big dog comes. So the big dog kids are gonna show you what the puppy done. Woman, matchbox on my clothes. I'm gonna sit here wondering, baby, matchbox on my clothes. No match is gonna get a long way to go. My clothes. Sitting here wondering, a box for my clothes. I got no matches, but I got a long way to go. Matchbox, baby. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you guys for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. Give yourself a round of applause. If you